Good morning, everyone. My name is David. I'm one of the senior trainers here at Workamajig. Today's topic, we're going to look at reporting in Workamajig. This will be more of a beginner, so people who are maybe brand new to the reporting functionality want to see what it can do. I'll do a little bit of intermediate level, but definitely not an advanced level. If you're looking for that, again, I do have a different webinar, and I'll probably conduct another webinar in a couple of months or so regarding it. Now, as far as if you have any questions, again, put those into the Q&A area. I'll stop and answer questions at certain points. Again, the best thing too is if you have any questions, send a note to support@Workamajig. Support at workamajig.com. Sorry about that. And again, your account manager will be able to help you. Okay. All right. So reporting. All right. So in general, of course, it's a database. So of course, we're able to gather information in, of course, we can pull it out. Now, the most common method of getting to this is that on each of them, other than creative, so for example, at a project manager, today PM, you're going to see views. Okay. Now, views are typically our standard reports that are in here. So again, I want to see projects. And so under projects, we have several set up, and I'll show you how to set these up. But again, all projects, active projects, again, filtering for certain information. Okay. So let me show you again. The views are typically one row per data, whatever you're looking for. And there's not really a way to kind of mash them together. So give me grand totals. I basically have to see the entire line. When we get to the next functionality, which will be custom reports, that is where we can get a little more innovative in how to get the data out. But first, I want to start here, the views, okay? So in each today page, there will be a section of views, and sometimes we'll have custom reports. So no matter what you're doing, so if that's for project manager, if I'm in billing, I'm going to see down here views, and then we may also have these standard reports like, AR aging and things like that under billing. And so each of these will have their own section. And again, the data associated with them are, relative to where you're at. Okay. There's another way to get to these up in the global search, which is here, the spyglass. I click on this, and under views, I'm going to get a list of all the things that I have access to. Okay. So as you see in billing, if I go down to billing, you'll see there's client invoices, there's, retainers. So again, these standard ones that we would have here, they may be also here as well. Now, for some of you, again, having to go into views and scroll down a lot, we also have the ability to favorite these. So if I say client invoice and I say I want to favorite this particular one, all invoices, then once I click on the blue star, that actually pops it up here. So again, that just becomes, I need to always go see this one, this all projects. And again, that just puts it in my view. And if I no longer want it, I just click on the star again, and that takes it out and puts it back in. Okay. Now, as far as, of course, when I start looking at the information that it contains, okay, so again, I click into all projects and I come into modify. So again, when I first run this, it's going to give me the information that I've asked for, right? So there's going to be some filters on here, right? What am I looking for? There may be some other things. I'm able to group it in certain ways. Okay. And I'll show you how to get that done. So again, in a standard, we usually don't, it's just kind of flat material, right? It's just, I have a project, that's what I'm looking for. And then I can decide what are the columns. Okay. Now, in order to modify, that is a security right. Okay. So, and that's controlled by security group. So let me just, while I'm here, I'll just go ahead and duplicate this tab, and I'll go to admin system setup. I know, I'm sorry if this is really simple. Okay. Security settings. And then I can come into here, and it's these rights that are going to start controlling under system administration. There's going to be right here, edit custom listings. That's the views. Can I see view? Okay. That's custom listings. Okay. For reports, it's going to be these two. Run custom reports. That means I'm going to be able to see the reports to run them. Design custom reports is what gives me the checkbox, or basically I can edit and edit that particular custom report. So again, those three: design custom reports, run custom reports, and then edit custom listings. Okay. Another control for reports is, what do I actually have access to? And again, this is set up by security group. So if I click on the pencil here, there's going to be certain data sets that I can use. So again, if I'm an account manager, should I actually have access to the, like data sets that involve finance? And some would say, no, they shouldn't have that. So again, that's the idea, is that we're saying, if you need to create a report on your own, is it visible, which means I can use it to create a new report, or is it hidden so I can't? I can still run reports, right? And if you give me a report and you let me modify it, then I'll be able to modify just that particular report. But again, this is just giving me full access to any data involving, for example, projects, okay? Project cost transaction. So that means when I have the transaction on a project. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. So that's kind of the security controls. Again, by security group, who's able to do that? Again, usually in the views, the only control there is if I'm on there. So if I have that ability to see project manager and today PM, that pretty much gives me the views to see the, like I see here, that gives me these views just because, again, those are available on the today page. All right. So that being said, our next step is, how do I actually modify these? So again, if you have them modify, I'm going to go ahead and click on modify. Okay. And then we'll start out by, again, I'll have standard ones, and these are just really drop down. So what fields are available? So it's really, we kind of limit what's in there, but again, it's all going to be all project related. So again, you can see account manager, is it active or not? Do we have actual hours on that project? Do I have budgeted hours? You can see all the budget numbers. So any of these fields would be available for you to put onto your report. Okay. So if I, suddenly I want, in this one, I don't have actual hours. So I click insert a row and I can start typing actual. There we go. Actual hours. There we go. Okay. And there we go. That's, again, adding that in. Now, if I want it to be in a different location, I can just grab it and pull it up. And again, now it's going to be after project type. Okay. So again, that's how I'm kind of adding new columns in. Again, if I don't want the column in, I just mouse over that particular column and I say, oh, I don't want the account manager. I don't want this one, the count or something like that. I can go ahead and, click the trash can, and then that would remove that particular item. Okay. All right. The next thing we would look at really is filters. Okay, so under the filters, of course, that's the questions I'm going to ask right before I run my report. Okay, and I always talk about there being hardwired ones or prompts. Okay, so a prompt is usually, again, I want the project status, but I want to pick what is the project status. And so when I add that in, so I click on that and I say, okay, project status, what's the condition? And the condition is several. I can have equal to, and then if I'm going to go ahead and deselect the prompt, equal to, and that would be a matter of me just in a drop-down list deciding what do I want to see. Now, when I talk about hardwiring things in, for example, I want this report to only be about production projects. So I can say project status equal to production. And now that is all it will run for. Only projects in production will be in the results. Okay. But most of the times what I find with things is we actually want to run it for different things. So that's why we use the prompt. So when I say prompt, it's like, what's the prompt label? That usually is the question that's being asked. And so that will, on the other side, and I'll show you that in a second, that's where I get the drop down list to make a decision. Okay. Now we do have different conditions equal to. Now, sometimes I'm going to say, I don't want it to equal that. That's another type of, usually a hardwired one. But we do have, as you can see, several. Now, some don't make sense. Between, that doesn't make sense for project status, but unfortunately, that's one of the conditions. But one thing for project status that I often see would be any of, right? So what's the idea of any of? So if I say any of, Then when I go and I'm going to be able to select more than one status. So the most common is, again, equal to, right? Sometimes if I just want to type in a little bit, I'll do the begins with, right? I only want to type in 23 dash, in the client ID or something like that. I'll use begins with. Of course, if we have contain, so within that field, if this, BOC it contains BOC, then that's what it will run for. Okay. But again, usually for project status, I often see the any of being used, and I'll just quickly show you what does that do. So now when I come into here and it says project status, any of, and I'm being able to say, okay, I want to see production and I want to see final build. And now it's going to be running just for those. Okay. All right. I can do that. I think I have a lot of stuff. So again, you can see where the other ones went away. Here, if I clear those out, then it's going to clear out that filter. And again, then it'll run as normal. Okay. Let's get back to this, to the modify. Okay. Now, a lot of times we also want to group. So there's a different section up here and it's saying group. And again, how do I want to group this? So it's very common that I want the client name in there. Now, another common grouping, again, I'm just dealing with projects in this case, is perhaps campaign, because I run a lot of campaigns. So I'm going to go campaign, probably name. Okay. And so I now have the client name and then I have the campaign name, and then everything else will kind of fall under those. So let's see again how that grouping happens. So now when I do the search, you can see best of class. And then here I have a campaign called campaign budget. And that only has, in this case, only one of them. And then I have, again, under here would be all projects that are not associated with that particular campaign. Okay. Right. So that's the grouping. That's the columns. Again, pretty straightforward on that. The filters were, again, you're putting those in to say, how do I want to, massage the data right off the bat by client, is it active or not? Those types of things. The last tab that we see is settings. Okay. The settings is where I'm going to be able to change the name. If I don't like it saying all projects, I can name it whatever I want. Once I change the report name, just to let you know, that actually changes the title along with it. Okay. Don't often see this. Some people like a subtitle to the report, but that's, again, what that's doing. Okay. Over on the right is where I'm going to say, well, when I run this, do I want to show the search conditions? So that's usually, again, up at the top, it'll tell you what are those search conditions. And often that's used when I print it. So when I print it out, is this associated with this? Okay. All right. Default, again, do I run this view when open? That means when I first open it, does it automatically run? I usually don't recommend this because a lot of times you want to set the filters, okay, before you run it, just in case you have, it set to all or blank filters, and now you're trying to pull back 10,000 records as opposed to just the 100 or 200 that you're looking for, okay? Now, private means that whoever created it or is set as the owner, this is the only person that can see this particular view. Okay. So again, usually this is set to private is unchecked. And then the owner is, again, who's kind of in control of it. If you're making it visible to others, then this kind of goes away. Okay. I mean, who's the owner? That does work. But again, it tends to be owner is in relation to private. Okay. And then visible to, in this particular view, what security groups are able to see it. And of course, when I click on to that blue link, it's going to tell me who is available or who it is set to. And it may be blank because I haven't put anybody in that particular security group. But again, I can see who it is that's involved in it. To add more, I just come in and click the plus, I add them. If I don't want that security group to have access to it, I can go ahead and, again, trash can them, and then they would not have access to this particular view. Okay. Now I do have a couple of questions for the filters. Okay. For the filters, any of sometimes gives a list and sometimes I have to actually put in a pipe in between. That's true. And so there are certain data sets or certain views where the any of doesn't work, just let us know if you run into that, and we can see if we can get that to be more of a drop down and checkbox. Okay. In the custom reports, again, when I get to that, there are some same thing. It may be that it's not able to do that, or we just haven't programmed it. So that any of is just a program. If you run into it where you don't have the drop down list, let us know. Okay. All right. The and or the more of a little bit of the advanced, how I can use the filters, and maybe I have and or. Okay, so that may be let's say project status instead of using any of, but I'll use a different one for this. I might use client ID. So I'm going to come in and do client ID. Okay, and I'm going to have another one where I say, oh, sorry. I'm going to pick a client. In this case, I'm just going to say Bob's Bingo. Okay, I want to hardwire it in for Bob's Bingo. Okay, then I say, well, I actually want to run it for another client as well. And so again, I'm kind of hardwiring this in. Okay, and I'm going to pick a different one. Now in general, okay, client ID equal to Bob's Bingo, and it's saying and client ID equals this other one. Okay. Well, again, it's not really possible for me to be two clients at once. Okay. So how do I get that? Now, so again, this and we do have what is called a show an advanced option, and I can actually say, okay, run these filters kind of as one. So again, I put an opening parenthesis on this one, and I put a closing parenthesis on this one. Okay, so again, it's grouping these two. I want to make sure that this group goes together, client ID, this one and this one. Okay, but again, they can't be together. So we actually have a further setting saying, okay, client ID is B Bingo, or, okay, or client ID is BBS6. Does that make sense? So again, this is saying run it for where all results are either going to be B Bingo or BBS6. So now when I apply that and run it, that, as you can see, I only get Bob's Bingo and Bubba's Shrimp. That's my only entries. Okay. Because again, I hardwired that. Okay. Does that make sense? Now, why did I put parentheses around that? Now, I'll give you a heads up on the parentheses, getting a little more advanced here. The and or, again, within a parenthesis using or, the last one needs to be an and. That's how I make the connection. If I did not have the parentheses, that's basically making or is just saying, give me all this or something else, which basically is saying, give me everything. Right? So make sure if you're using the or that it's actually contained within the parenthesis. Okay. So remember, the first one is an or. Second one, if there's 3 or 4 of these together, it would be first one is or, second one is or, third one is or, fourth one, which is the closing statement, would be an and. Okay. So you're basically saying project, in this case, project type and client ID, but within client ID, I want B Bingo or BBS. Make sense? Okay. All right. Now, again, we talked about settings. We talked about the layout, how that gets there. Now, of course, a lot of times we have this, for example, this all projects one. I like this, but I want to get a little bit different view. So what we can do is say at the more, copy this view. Okay, so copy this view, and it's going to say, are you sure you want to copy it? I say yes. And so the mantra now, sorry, this is my route. Well, the mantra is, okay, I've made the copy. I can see that it's called that. And I'll say, apply the changes, memorize. And so now I know that I'm dealing with just the copy. Okay, so I have copy up. So now when I come back in and modify it, I know this is just the copy. My original all projects one, right? So I can come over to here and actually show you that. My all projects. And you'll notice that it's slightly different, right? So probably in the filters, right? Here's the filters for my original one. And then here's maybe the filters for my other one where, remember, I was still editing. Okay. So again, I want to make sure that if you're going to make a copy of it, you go ahead and make a copy or copy this view, apply the changes, memorize, and then remodify so that you can start working and then it's just kind of logged in just to that one. Okay. Now, the other caveat on this is when you make a copy, we automatically set it to be private to whoever did that. So it'd be up to you on here is to uncheck private and then say, okay, now what security group should be able to see it? Okay, otherwise it will remain private. Okay. Also, now that I have copy, right, I may have, again, I want it to be all projects. So I'm going to take that out, but this one was by client and campaign. Remember my grouping? So there we go. By client and by campaign. So I now relabeled that. And so now when I come back out, I apply those changes, apply those changes, memorize, and now I have my new version of that particular one. And that would now be available under my views. So if I come into, here we go. So if I come into my views and under projects, here's under projects, and you'll see all projects by client and campaign. So again, that's how I got my next copy of these. Okay. Now, what we did notice on this one, again, pretty straightforward. It's barely just, can I put in, what column am I using? What order are those columns? Okay. You notice I have a couple of things in here under modify. I have what is called a calculated column. Now, this will allow you, at least in a simple form, to put in something that is, not standard. Okay. So in this case, I don't really have a way of counting my projects. Okay. So I want to make sure, how many projects are there under Bob's Bingo, right? When I run the report. So I actually created a calculated column, which is right here, calculated column, and I give it a caption. I say, what type of data am I going to use? And that's usually number or text or date. Most typical would be number. Then I put in the formula. Well, what's the formula? And in this case, I just put in the number 1 so that every time there's a project, basically I'll get a number 1 with it. Okay. And so that's when I run it here. So let me go ahead and do this, apply the changes, run it. You'll see that I get a project count of 10s because there's all of those got counted. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 subtotal. So I have 10 projects for Bob Bingo versus my, and the total projects of this period for 112. Okay. Some of the other things that we can do with these calculated columns, again, I'm not going to discuss the case one, that's a little bit more advanced, but we can do some of these simple ones like subtracting 2 different columns, right? So I have a budget and then minus my total gross. So again, how do I click those in? I just simply say, amount billed, right? And then I also want, maybe my current total budget, right? Does that make sense? Current total budget, here we go. Current total budget, right? So this, there it is right there. I already have it. So again, I have my current total budget. And so again, I'm just going to do a simple calculation on that. I'm going to go ahead and put that in. And again, you can see it's kind of like Excel, right? Current total budget minus amount billed. And that should give me my remaining to bill, right? And so again, when I run that, apply the changes, that's what it's doing. So it just gives me, again, if it started out with 0, then again, that's the remaining bit. Okay. So that's what I would say for the calculated columns. It's going to be used mostly for this type of weird thing where I'm doing the count, or I'm going to do, for example, with remaining, where I'm going to do a simple calculation, A minus B. Okay. Once you get into divisions, there's a little bit more stuff we have to put into it, just so it kind of brings it across. But again, this is a way that I can set up that data. Okay. But as a beginner, I'm just going to say, try and just use the columns that are there, and then maybe some simple calculated columns if that's need be. Okay. All right. So as I said, these are all throughout, again, the views are pretty prevalent, every Today page has them. Again, you don't worry about if you made a mistake and I got rid of them, right? Again, there's always going to be kind of a copy. We can just reform it. So again, if you delete it, it's not the end of the world. Remember, a report is just reporting on the data. It's not affecting the data per se. Okay. It's just displaying that data for you. But one of the things in views that is helpful in a lot of the views is we'll have this checkbox along the left-hand side. Let me see. Apply changes, memorize that. Okay. There's a checkbox along the side, and that may help you manipulate multiple projects. So again, in the project view, if I check boxes, it's going to actually allow me to update a lot of the project fields. Okay. And same thing with if there's project custom fields, it'll allow me to update those as well. But again, this is one reason to have the views is, again, it may allow me to do this kind of mass update across multiple things. Okay. So that's the nature of views. So if I went to campaigns, all campaigns, again, I want to do some sort of views, but again, having that checkbox, which allows me to update them, update those fields en masse, again, is pretty helpful. Okay. All right. So that is kind of the views. Are there anything that was any questions? Again, I just see the any of, needing the bar, and or ors. Okay, let me see what we have here. Okay, so the prompt. So again, if I'm in a view, so let me go back to my projects and all this. So what does the prompt do? When on a filter, right? In the filter, and I get the prompt just means that it's going to now be here as opposed to it's hardwired. I always say it's hardwired. So in this case, under the filter, I hardwired these in that this report will only run for Bingo and Bubba Shrimp, right? Then that's it, right? No matter what, even if I have a different filter in it that allows me to pick a different client, it's still only going to run by that. So that's the difference between prompt. So prompt is here, all these prompts here. Okay. Okay. And then the close parenthesis, remember, if you ever in the filters, again, have an open parenthesis, which how do I get to that? Show advanced, and that's going to have the opening. Then you always have to, somewhere down below, you're going to absolutely need the close parenthesis. Okay. So again, once you turn on hide advanced or show advanced, then every time you go into the filters, it's going to show that until you finally say, okay, hide it. And now it's not going to show it. Okay. But realize that, again, we're still going to show you those things here. So the parentheses and the ors. Okay. Okay. And I'll get into, okay, so I have a question on the calculated fields to show cycles. I do have some simple calculations that I'm going to show you regarding time difference, but again, I tend to find that to be a little bit more advanced, okay? What are the difference between views and reports? Getting to that one, how do you find a field is in a how do we find that a field is in a data set? Yeah, there's not a great way of doing that. We were in the beginning kind of saying, this is what the data set contains, but we kept adding and kind of changing things around that is kind of hard to keep up. So basically we would say, if it's project related, it's going to be here. If it's billing related, which means client invoice related, then that field's going to be there. So again, client ID, some of the client, invoice number, all those types of things, if it's related to the client invoice. So each of these are kind of related to that thing. So estimates, well, what's in an estimate? All the fields in the estimate are likely going to be in the view for that. Okay. You mean we could change that? Okay. Now I think the last question is, so when I do this, when I run this report, and again, for the projects, And it's saying, okay, so like this one says project status is cells up. So one of the updates is I can, check the box and I can make a decision. Okay, the project status, I want to change the status to final build. And so again, when I check that, you see that the project status is now updated to final build. And again, that will change anything that's selected will accept those changes. And it's not just for one. Again, I can change multiple at a time, right? As long as I have settings for each of these and I say update it, it'll update those fields that were selected. Okay. All right. So now we come into, so that's the views. I always say, first thing you want to do is use the views. Why? Because you saw what the actions I get. So not only in a view can I go ahead and click it, right? And it gives me the ability to update multiples. I can also, again, it's going to give me access to that transaction. Okay. So when I click on it, this is a project related one. So when I click on the line, it takes me to the project. Okay. If I'm in this is in billing. If I'm in, for example, here, and I go to, for example, in the views assignments, this is related to tasks. So if I come into here and I do this search, should have some, let's see here. Assignments. Here, I'll just do this one. Okay. Okay, so I have these assignments. So when I click onto this is task related. So when I click into the line, it's going to take me to that particular task. If I click into the project number, it's going to give me the project number. In this case, we also have a folder that allows me to navigate a little bit differently. But for the most part, views are always going to allow me to get to that data. If it's in billing and I'm looking at client invoice, I click it, it opens the client invoice. Okay, so that's the one good thing about doing views as your first step. Okay, now the next is we have reports. So what's the difference in reports? Reports are in every one report center. And we have some standard reports, but I'm going to actually talk about, standard reports are standard reports. These are typically under the views or under reports for those particular items. So like the 10-9 or the AP aging, AR aging, project finance, again, not too many in here, but again, project budget analysis. These are standard reports. Not a lot we can do with those. There is a way to edit some things, but that's, again, these are kind of the standard reports. But what we wanted to talk about was more the custom reports. Okay. So when I come to the time analysis, so what's the difference? Okay. I'm actually going to do other. So under other, and I have, for example, time entry. Okay. So time entry, dates, time detail, data, labor, net. Okay. So in this case, I have a timesheet. So this one is going to look at time detail. So to create a new report, if I have access, I'm saying what data set am I going to use? And again, it's basically time entries. So I want to make sure I'm going to use, I can just type in time actually, time, and it's going to give me these different data sets. Now, be aware, okay, if you're giving people access to data sets, what is it giving it to them? Now, the most common one we have is labor net. Am I going to expose labor net? And in this case, we have time detail and it says no cost. That means there's no labor net. Okay. But we have one that does show labor net. So which one am I going to give to my account managers or my project managers? They normally see that, but what about my creatives? Would I show creatives the labor net? Okay. Right? So usually not. So we would want to, typically you would create most reports using this time detailed data, no cost. And then I'm going to restrict any access to the time detailed data with labor net. Again, it's a data set. So again, I can decide if it's hidden or visible to them. But when it comes to the report, if I give that security group access to the report and they have modify or design rights, which means they can modify it, then guess what? Then they have access to it and they can change it and make a copy. Okay, so be aware of that. All right. So now when I do time detailed data, again, what's the difference in a report? Well, for the most part, this is really a report. It's going to give me the information. However, things that we can't do in the views are like this one. So I'm going to actually show one that I already have, which is my timesheet backup. Okay. The reason I'm using this is kind of giving me a little different view on it. So for the most part, when I modify this, you're going to say, what the heck is that? Okay, so I have it saying, give me the person's name, then give me the project name, give me the amount of hours, okay? What was billable, what was non-billable, and actual hours worked. That's my grand total, okay? Now, if I run a timesheet, really, I'm going to see every individual time entry. And I can show this by if I'm going to add in date worked. Okay, so date worked. Okay, there we go. So when I do this and I go ahead and apply these changes and run it, you'll see that I get, here I go, here's the person, here's the project, and on this date, because they entered 3 hours, but I might see right here, see, I have all of these because they are on different days, it makes it break out. Okay, so the date is making it become a new line. All right. Now, in a view, that's really what you get. You get one line with the data, and there's not a way to say, combine all of these projects into just a single line. Okay. They can't do anything but show me the date as well. So again, it breaks it out. But in reports, we can often say, okay, well, if I want to roll things up, we have what is called a grouping function. So I say, group the rows together. And then it's going to say, well, how do I want to do this? Now, usually the project name is the same across every data point, right? So I can say group that, so those will all come together. But when it comes to hours, I have somebody entered in 1 hour, 1 hour, half an hour, 45 minutes, right? Whatever it is. And instead of showing me each of those individual ones, I'm going to say, add them all up. Okay. And that adding them all up will let it become a single line. Okay. Right. So this one so I ran it, as you saw, with date worked, and that there's no way to sum a date, right? So again, that's causing it to break out. But if I remove that, okay, now everything can roll up into that single entity. So again, I had those 4 lines for this one, but now it rolled it all up and gave me a grand total of 9 hours as opposed to the individual. Okay. Now I'll give you a heads up. What's the difference between sum and group, right? So summing means I have 1 + 2 + 3. Okay. Now, if I had 2 1-hour entries and a 2-hour entry, okay, sum would show me 4 hours. But if I said group it, now it would show me 1 hour because ones are alike. So that's the group. And then I have another one that says 2. And so then if I subtotal that, it would show me 3 hours. Does that make sense? Because I use the group as opposed to the sum. Now, there are some other ones where we can do like average or the max or the minimum. Again, and they do what they say. What's the biggest number there? Show me the max. What's the minimum number there? Show me the minimum. Okay. Does that make sense? So usually when we're looking at numbers that are, I would typically add up, that's when I would use the sum. Okay. Now, nice thing is, there you go. It's like as you can see, there's really not a difference between the views and reports after that fact, right? Filters are still the same. I want to say, what's my filter? I can actually say the filter in this case is maybe the username, right? And I can go off of first name, or there's the username equal to, or I could say, again, any of, and I can hardwire it by selecting, or I can do the prompt where it's out on the other side, and then I can select for 1 or 2 different people. Okay, so again, this works the same, right? The settings works exactly the same, right? I decide if it's private, is it for me? Who's the owner? What security groups can see this? And again, I can name it whatever I like. If I want to make a copy of it, copy this view, same process, copy, apply the changes, memorize. Now I have my carbon copy and I can start editing that one to give me a slightly different view. Okay. But I did want to show you again, this one again, what's causing these things to kind of break out is just that having that project number in there causes it to break out. So if I had removed this, right? So now everything can go in. Probably I wouldn't use the user full name as a grouping. I could use the username here. Okay. And drag this up to the top, remove that. that grouping. And now, as you can see, I'm going to get the username. I'm going to get the total number of hours, get a total number of non-billable hours, and the actual hours worked. So this is a pretty common one that I see. And so there we go. So here's how many hours did this person work? And so again, I can see exactly what they've been working on. One thing I have seen is instead of grouping by person, maybe I group by department. So here we go. So I group by department, saw that, and go ahead and search. And now I have, these are my departments, and these guys happen to not have any departments. So that's why they fall into here. But again, this is kind of the way I can slice and dice. Now, what's the difference? This is another big difference between obviously a report versus a view. I can click on this all day and it doesn't give me anything. Okay. Now, the only thing that does work in reports is the project number. Okay. So I'll give you that heads up. So if I come in here and probably I have user department, this time I will probably use username. Okay. Because I'm going to group, or I'm going to have a line for the project number. Okay. So this way I get the user department, I get the username, but I'll still have these grand totals. Okay. And then why do I do that? Because now when I run this, now I get the projects just like before, but maybe I do this, right? So it's kind of doing this bit. Okay. But you can see that this project number is a hot link. And so that can take me to the project. Nowhere else, but it just gives me to the project number. So project numbers are hot links, just to let you know. And so again, that gets me that. That's really the main difference. Again, I can't drill down anywhere else, just that project number. Okay. Okay. The other thing that it doesn't have is obviously I can't mass update from this either, right? It doesn't allow me that. This is purely getting the data out of the system. Okay. In all other cases, again, I can always modify it to show what I want. There's no difference in that. But when I come to, apply changes. And then when I'm printing, again, we still get the same. Does it go to PDF? Does it go to Excel? And someone will have the copy the to Google Sheet link or make it CSV for you to import into Excel. Okay. All right. So now on reports, right? Because we can do this kind of extra little data, right? I can roll things up. There may be some other tricks I put in. So again, we still have that standard calculated column. And again, the most typical, I would say, well, what's the percent perhaps of actual hours, versus billable hours or something like that, right? Out of how many hours work, how much of it was billable. Okay. Now, so in this case, I might put percent. Okay. So what is the calculation that it needs to be done? So again, that's going to be actual hours worked. And again, divided by, billable hours divided by actual hours. So you have to move this over. Sorry about that. And then put in a divisor. Okay. Right. So that's going to get me that percentage. Okay. And so now I can go ahead and say, okay, now in this case, because I'm kind of looking for a percentage, I'm thinking group would probably be the better route because I'm going to get a single line type of idea. Right. Okay. And then I wouldn't ever subtotal this because that wouldn't make sense. I'd have 100,000%, which doesn't make sense. So usually when I do percentages, I do it kind of like that. So does that make sense? And then, so now when I apply this and I run it, it's going to give me, of course, in this case, I only have billable versus, it's always 100% billable, as you can see, or it's 0% billable, right? So have non-billable or not billable. So, where do I get into this? So this is where, again, what's causing it to break out? And it's this project number. Okay. So now I can go back and I can say, okay, I don't need project number in here, right? So in this case, I'm going to take out username here and I'm going to put username here. Okay. Why did I do that? because I want to be able to roll up all of their stuff and say, how much are they billable? Does that make sense? And the project number, again, projects are usually billable or not billable, right? And so this is where I start to get into this, where I get that the divisor, who is it? And then how much of their stuff was billable versus non-billable. Here's one. Well, I guess this is just way too small. So it kind of came into 100%. If that makes sense. Okay. It's just, that came out weird. Just a second. Group some group. Oh, okay. So again, sorry, this was grouping. So this one actually was saying it's grouping. So each one of those calculations came up with a different calculation. So now I have this further one, sorry about this, where it says calculate after the main query. So what this one is going to do is basically say, get the grand total of actual billable and get the grand total of actual hours, and now make that division. That's the idea of this calculate after main query. Okay. So it's saying pause, get the grand totals, and then run it. And so this is going to actually combine these into their own. And so that's where I get now, Bryn is on a single line, 27 total hours, 20 hours non-billable. That's about 50%, going on 60% of it being billable. That makes sense? So again, this is something I can't do in views. It's only done in reports. And again, I'm just giving you very simple ones. And again, that's where I would stay. Of course, we can do very complex things. Okay. Just to get that kind of information in there. Okay. Okay. To add a percent sign to the percent, so is there a code to say show percentage? There is not really. So again, we have to use PCT because it has to start out with a letter. It can't even start with a number. So there's not a way for us to get that caption to be anything, but it's just put in PCT instead of a percentage sign. Okay. Now, can I get a percent sign where it gives me a percent on this? Yeah, again, I would just leave it as a number. Again, there's a little bit of trickery to maybe get it to concatenate to show a percentage sign. But again, more of an Excel concept, right? We know the data is that. Now, in this case, I can wrap it in parentheses. I don't have to, but again, I usually wrap it in parentheses and then say multiply, which is the asterisk times 100, right? And that will give me in a true percentage view. That makes sense. Okay. Okay, so now we come into, again, a little bit more advanced, and I didn't want to go there too far, but I have a question. Can you base the calculation on total hours workable in a month? Okay, where is that field? Right? There's not a field for workable hours in a month, right? So could we say, perhaps modify this and say, okay, the workable hours may be a custom field. So if you have a custom field, I may be able to use that because it's going to provide that number for me. That makes sense. Or do I just simply say, okay, I'm just going to say 80, minus actual hours worked. Sorry, 40. Oh, month. Sorry, 160. Nope, not 060. 160 minus actual hours worked. Okay. So I can change that to a minus. And so that may be the calculation I have. So something like that. Okay. And it might do something like that. And so again, this may not come out. It may look strange, but again, I'm doing that single number minus the other thing that gives me that number. Okay. Now the hard part is when I have, well, this person has 160 and this one has 110 and this one has 180, right? It's when you start getting those, it's usually I'd look to a custom field for that. So I can pull it from their record. So I can put that number in there. Okay. Okay. And again, we're not seeing work days because it's Monday through Friday type of thing. We're not seeing that. It's just saying how many, in this case, I'm just saying how many hours are in there. If they have a time entry, it's in the report. If they don't have a time entry, it's not in the report. Okay. But again, some of the things that we can do with this is, for example, I created this timesheet backup. Oh, so that was my simple timesheet backup. I have another one. Oh, I got my timesheet backup squazzed. Okay. Oh, it's in my different one. So I don't know if I did a lot of reports on this one. Sorry about that. Okay. So for example, here are some of the more advanced ones. Again, I wanted to keep it simple. I didn't want to go into depth of this. So this is one way, again, in this reporting functionality, because I can see every single date, that means I can see what month it was worked on. And so in this case, I can say, hey, if the date worked is January, then give me the number of hours worked. If it's February, give me the number of hours worked. So now when I run this particular report, these would be the January hours. Again, I don't have anything in January, or I might have other filters, but again, that's the separation out. And then all I'm doing is repeating this and kind of just coming in and changing this from 01 to 04. And that would be my April one, for example. Oh. Does that make sense? Even though I just don't have anything in there. So again, here it's none of these hours are seen as being in January, April. That's why it's showing zeros. But that's some of the more advanced stuff that we can put into reports. Okay. And that really, in a nutshell, is that simple and basic setup for reports and versus views. Again, the main takeaway is try it in views, because views are going to give you those extra links. Okay. I can't consolidate it as well, but again, it's still providing me that data. Okay. Now, when I want to do better analysis to it, that's when I'm going to step to the custom reports and start to work on those. And again, we do have a lot of tricks and a lot of coding that can go in to get data. Okay. I just did not show that to you per se. I showed you a little bit of those. Yeah, the custom fields, right? So I would say, again, send us a note asking us, okay, what is it that you're looking for? Again, how would they come in? Let me see if I have anything in this one. Okay, here's an example, right? Contract periods. I said, well, if it's labor, then divide this, there's this coding to basically give me a month and give me the number of days in that month, right? The difference between those, and then, do something else with it. So again, we can get quite distinct in what we're doing. Okay. With the calculations, if they're calculated after the fact or in, while it's running. So there's quite a bit we can do. Okay. But again, this was more just to show you what the system can provide and what reports are visible. Okay. Now, again, along with those views, along with those custom reports, of course, we have standard reports, right? So under financial reports, I know you guys probably all know this, but again, standard financial reports, journals, the general ledger report, project P&L, client P&L, balance sheet, right? Corporate P&L, right? If I'm looking at AR, of course, we have the aging, sales journal, sales tax analysis, right? Those are all geared towards, again, pulling your data out for specific reasons. If you're pre-billing, accrued order detail, AP aging. If you're in the US, obviously 1099s, okay? Traffic reports are going to be more assignment based. Again, a little more static, and we may go to a view, might give you a little better view, look at it. But again, that's the idea of these. Project financials, again, tend to be like the project budget analysis. That's usually the most common one, where it's kind of giving you the project summary. So if I just go to project here, so all projects, project budget analysis versus this, it's really the same fields. It's showing me what's my budget versus actual. This report can show this. Project budget analysis has the added functionality in this case of if I put a date range on it, then it's only looking at transactions within that date frame. Okay. But otherwise, it's kind of like the summary will work, right? The project summary or project view will give me a lot of the data that I'm looking for. Okay. Does that make sense? Okay. And that is really where I would like to end. But do you have any questions? Let me just kind of quickly go through and make sure we did this. Well, that would be okay. As far as the webinars, of course, the webinars are always usually 2 to 3 days out. They'll be on our YouTube channel, which you can subscribe to. And then if you did register, you'll actually get a link back saying, hey, here's the recording. Okay. And again, for the data sets, I'm sorry, yeah, we don't really have a list of what is in every data set. It's just, again, the data sets are basically, is it billing related? Is it purchasing related? Is it project related? And so those fields would be in there. Okay. If you would like a field that you don't see within that data set, just, let us know and we'll see if we can get it added in. Not always possible, but a lot of times it's like, oops, yep, forgot that one. Okay. Okay, and the any of, we talked about that, where there are some that don't have that any of drop down to select. So you have to put a pipe in between each one for it to work, but, okay. Again, is it possible to calculate field to show the cycle or lead time of a task or to do? Again, we do have, some calculations to use like date difference. I would recommend that if you send in an email and kind of show us what is it that you're looking for, then we can help put that into a report that you can use and then add that coding to your library to use in the future. Okay. So there's a question. I'm trying to create a report that lists free logging contractors. So again, the easiest one to do that is just go to salesperson. In this particular case, they're a contact. So they're a person. So I'm going to go to contacts. I'm probably going to go to views and all contacts here. I think this has contractor. Let me modify it. And this may or may not contractor. There it is, contractor. Okay. And so again, if the filter is contractors, then I can say contractor equal to, and I'm going prompt, right? So if I apply that now and I go to this and it can say contractor equal to, and unfortunately, yeah, this didn't even give me a drop down. So I have to say yes. And so that's going to give me all my contractors. If I leave it blank, it's going to give me both. Okay. If I say no, then it's going to give me just ones that do not have that checked. Okay. So again, probably just going to salesperson and all contacts should give you that information. Okay. And again, selecting from here, this allows me to update any of the fields related to contacts from this particular view. Okay. Projects would allow me to change project information. Okay. Okay. Oh, can we set reports to auto run? Yes, that was that setting. So if I go to modify, again, settings, and it says right here, run this view when open. So it does that. Now we do have a new functionality that once you run it, let me deselect this. Okay. Once we run it, based upon the filters you have here, right, we can schedule a report. So let me run it again. And I can basically create a new schedule. Not all of them allow me to do a new schedule, but I can schedule a lot of the reports to run. Okay, so let me, probably it's looking at something different. Let me refresh. So the scheduled report is really saying new scheduled report. This is one where I can send myself or whoever an email that will have an attachment, either a PDF or an Excel, with the results of this report. So I often see this with like timesheet, that timesheet backup I was showing. I'll send that out to you every Monday, and it'll show me last week's time entries for the entire week. Okay. And then I just say, who does it get emailed to? They can see it in PDF, or if you do it in Excel, then that's what you do. Okay. All right. Combining 3 custom reports into one report in Excel? Yes, absolutely. In Workamajig? No, they're separated out. If it's the same data set, then we could look at getting those together. But of course, yeah, there's not a combining different data sets. Now, if you're a little more advanced or you have programmers on staff, every report will have its own API key. So we do have an API available. That you can basically, there's the key for this particular report. It'll pull this data based upon your personal key plus the company key. Again, you can pull the data out of here into like Power BI or Tableau, and do that for many different things, and then massage them and assemble them in those particular programs. But within Workamajig, there's not a way for us to combine 3 different reports into one. If they're the same data set, then we would look at basically making that, show the data in the one as opposed to running 3 different ones. Okay. Anything else? Okay, I'll wait a couple more seconds here. Thank you guys all for attending. Do appreciate it. Again, if you have any further questions, support@workamajig.com. Again, your account manager is happy to help you. If you have any further questions, again, I'm just kind of sitting here waiting for any questions to come in. If not, thank you all very much, and have a great rest of your day. Like I said, I'll stay on for a little bit more if you guys do have questions, but otherwise, have a great rest of the day.